Good morning, everyone. It's nearly the afternoon, perhaps this afternoon. Good morning. So great to be here at this conference. And I just wanted to say, man, how about that gold price? How about that gold price? Just come back from the Gold Maxi conference, and the guys are talking about when Lambo and all these kinds of things. Bitcoin's languishing, boys. But no, it's a fascinating time, isn't it? Bitcoin performance over the years is incredible. Gold and silver playing catch up. It's really a fascinating tale of structural, monetary and political dysfunction, isn't it? So very, very interesting times. What Dave and Sarah failed to mention, which was not his duty to do so because he also doesn't really know this, is that I've structured this talk really as a kind of part two of his talk. We sort of were coordinating prior to this, and so he spoke about state failure, the importance of state-proofing yourself against state failure, and that's actually very much it's an important aspect of what we do at Sakeliga. Sakeliga, for those of you not from the country or whose Afrikaans is not terribly good, Sakeliga means business league. Sake is business and Liga is league. And we're a league of businesses with the primary goal to restore economic order amid state failure and harmful state intervention. Our goal is to fend off what amount to attacks by the state on business communities through the mechanisms of either policy and legislation and regulation or through malicious action that is unlawful, outside of constitutional bounds, or simply through incompetence and failure. But my talk today is less about state failure than it is about what happens when states don't fail. It's one thing to talk about the failure of states. It's one thing to talk about the failure of fiat. And indeed, the huge adoption that we've seen for cryptocurrencies over the last 15, 16 years or so is testament to that. But the dollar's still around. The rand is still around. The rand hasn't failed. In fact, the Reserve Bank recently lowered the inflation target, and officially at least, whether you believe these or not, inflation is actually coming down. States and their mechanisms and their apparatus are very powerful. They can be very entrenched. When I spoke at this conference 2 years ago, I reminded the audience that for not just years, not just decades, but for hundreds of years, we've vested enormous amounts of power into what we might think of as what we call the state, or what we might think of as the territorial central state. So much so that it becomes a ever-present and pervasive theme of what we talk about. A few talks ago, there were gentlemen seated up here on stage talking about essentially how we have to deal with states, with state regulation, with state meddling in our financial and monetary freedom. And that's only one aspect of how states can use their authority, the power that's been vested in them, to exert tremendous amounts of power over their populations. So I wanted to start off by talking about the malicious but effective state. You see, even weak and incompetent states can mount sustained and effective attacks on productive society. Weak states can actually be very vicious states. Very often when a state is in the process of failing, but has not failed yet, it can mount incredibly vicious attacks. attacks. It's the strong, confident, highly legitimate, highly trusted states that very often can be far more benign. Now, so we talk about failed states, which is a very, very extreme form of institutional and kind of authority breakdown. We might talk about many aspects of failure in South Africa, but one thing we can't say is that in totality, that there is a failed state. There is a state that is failing in many areas, losing legitimacy, feeling threatened, and but nonetheless still has the capability and the capacity to lash out. And this leads us to a concept that I won't dwell on for very long, but it's something like what I think it was the theorist Sam Francis called anarcho-tyranny. As states get weak, they lose the ability to regulate and to have authority over difficult spheres like crime, disorganized and organized crime, and focus their attention far more on the easily regulatable spheres amongst very compliant populations. Now, I know anarchy is a bad word for a lot of people in the world. Maybe for a lot of you in this room, it can be a good word. And certainly in political theory, it can be a kind of value-neutral word. But when we talk about anarcho-tyranny, we talk about the states that allow, maybe a better term would be something like chaos tyranny. States that allow large realms and domains to degenerate into chaos, but then in their shrinking regulatory capacity go very, very hard at already law-abiding compliant citizens. Look at the South African Revenue Service. The South African state can't really solve crime problems, but boy, they're going to do lifestyle audits all day long until they can squeeze every last penny. So this is a kind of a narco-tyranny that you see with states that are weak but have not failed. And it's so important what came up earlier in that panel, because one of the gentlemen said that we need to stop making ourselves so easily regulatable for these kinds of entities. These kinds of states love legibility. They love to be able to see things clearly. And the less capable that they become, the more clear they need domains for them to be able to regulate them. Think of it like a rainforest and the beautiful diversity and complexity of a rainforest versus just a line of pine trees. Okay, states would far rather deal with the line of pine trees. You know exactly what's there. It's a known quantity. The rainforest is much more complex, much more difficult to regulate. You take something out, you trigger an ecosystem response that you can't quite predict. So that, in a South African context, is very, very much what we're dealing with. Very, very much what we're dealing with. We had unthinkable riots in KwaZulu-Natal in 2021. Who got arrested? Who stopped anyone from looting? It was incumbent upon communities to rise up and try and defend themselves. The state was nowhere to be seen virtually. But boy, SARS were doing those lifestyle audits. That's a narco-tyranny. And states like this can mount general attacks on their population. The National Health Insurance Act that's been passed, for example, would be a general attack on private health care. It would seek to essentially ban private medical aids and institute a single monopolized state medical scheme. Okay? So regardless of your race, color, creed, language, background, your private medical aid, the state is trying to target that to get rid of that. And that is something that Sakeliga is taking on, which I'll speak to in a bit. States can also do targeted attacks. The racial policies of this government are targeted attacks. The racial policies of the previous government were targeting specific people from the population. The Employment Equity Act specifically targets certain people, males, white, Indian females in certain contexts, and says, you can't have this economic opportunity. You can't get this job at this company. You can't own this much of this business and still get a license or still do business with the state. So we have targeted attacks in South Africa. They're often race-based. But states can choose any means and any mechanism to undertake targeted attacks as well. So when you're dealing with the malicious state anywhere in the world, you need to understand that it is seeking to mount an attack, either on your bank account, on your business. It is trying to squeeze you out or gain an advantage over you so that you will pay more and more tribute to that state for your right to live and operate freely. So how does Sakeliga's strategy, what is our strategy against these attacks? Well, this is very much a core part of what we're doing. We think that business in this country, the business community and the economy is under both general and targeted attack by the state. Entrepreneurs are people who are very good at planting and cultivating seeds that grow. But they don't always get a good read, or they are not always able to solve the problem of toxic soil. And very many entrepreneurs in this country are planting seeds into very toxic soil. One of Sakeliga's missions, core mission of ours, is to detoxify that soil by pushing back harmful regulations, by helping roll back harmful legislation, by keeping the state within its constitutional limits, within its lawful bounds, so that it's not able to toxify that soil into which entrepreneurs need to plant not just one, but 3, 4, 5, 10 seeds, and you get this lovely forest that emerges. So another way you can think about it is if you've ever watched American football, there's the guy running with the ball, and everyone's trying to kill him, basically. And his teammates are able to fend off all these attacks. It's not like rugby. Rugby, you're not allowed to tackle someone without the ball. In American football, you can just about do what you like to anyone who doesn't have the ball. Creating sometimes, if they get it right, this beautiful pathway for the guy with the ball to run through and score the touchdown. Sakeliga is a blocker, and we want entrepreneurs to score touchdowns. And the attacks are coming through very, very pernicious and harmful regulation, and of course, types of state failure that amount to a kind of a narco-tyranny. So in order to take on effective malicious states, you need leverage. And at Sakeliga, we think that there is great leverage to be gained through public interest litigation. Now, the court system in South Africa is not perfect, but it is also not entirely dysfunctional. There are very many capable courts and very many capable judges, and we have a constitutional order that is still functional enough that we can use the court system to push back very effectively against the overreach of state power. We did that last year by pushing back the aviation license regulator, who was trying to make race a fundamental criteria for issuing businesses with aviation licenses. Those licenses were instituted for safety reasons, because if your airplane falls out the sky, that's not a good thing. So once you tick the boxes on safety, you should get your license issued. They were trying to tie that to your race. We used litigation to push that back, got a very emphatic court order that regulator may not do that, and we've empowered hundreds of aviation businesses to continue operating. That is the kind of impact that you can have through well-structured litigation. And why it offers leverage is because an organization like Sakeliga can confront a 2 trillion rand a year organization, known as the South African government, on a level playing field in a court of law. And if we put together a good case and good papers and the court accepts that, the state has to answer that case. And if the state does not answer that case, it will go on the unopposed roll and we will win that case. And so we force a very large entity to essentially negotiate with us through a structured, legitimate mechanism called the court system on issues of public interest. The ability for businesses to operate and thrive. Secondly, we live in a very fluid and evolving international order, and Sakeliga is able to be a provider of insight and information to foreign trade missions and various embassies from around the world as to how to navigate and themselves help shape what is going on in the South African environment. Regulation doesn't just harm local businesses, it harms German businesses, it harms American businesses, it harms Malaysian businesses. And all these embassies are desperate to get a strong handle on precisely what's going on here and engage with a local partner that understands the regulatory landscape and has experience in tackling it through effective, high-impact litigation. Of course, other means of leverage are available to us as well, and we use these to the fullest extent available. We live in a digital media world where you can spread your message on platforms at an incredibly low cost. This is a wonderful means of scale and of leverage. And of course, using AI has become a central feature of a lot of the work that we do at Sakeliga. We have some excellent vibe coders in our ranks. It's an incredible way to accelerate the development of systems internally, but also, of course, to match. We know that states also have this technology, but to be able to start matching much larger entities with intelligence scale actually levels that playing field. So as much as SARS is definitely deploying AI at a very, very sophisticated level, we can also deploy the tools of artificial intelligence and information gathering and intelligently connecting information for our own benefits. This can benefit our court cases tremendously. It can help us with the knowledge of discovering where the state is planning its next attack vector. We're able to monitor how policies are moving through Parliament in pre-parliamentary phases much sooner than we were ever able to do before, and on a much more, almost an instantaneous basis. So this is a great way in which we are able to achieve leverage. Now my clock tells me I've got 2 minutes left, and I think I'm going to bring it into land pretty quickly. That's who we are and what we're doing. So where does Bitcoin come into this? Well, I had to squeeze Bitcoin into the talk. So, but let me just say, let me just to my credit, my name actually appears in the credits of Safety and Amos's book, The Bitcoin Standard, because I met him a while back, and when he wrote the first drafts of the book, I did some proofreading for him. So I'm in one of the most famous Bitcoin books. So with my credibility in Bitcoin established, what lessons can we learn? I'm going to rattle off a non-exhaustive list of lessons that Bitcoin can teach organizations like us, but anyone who wants to develop and think through the principles of dealing with the malicious attacks of the state. Number one, attacks create resilience. Bitcoin has been attacked since that day, and it's just gotten stronger. So the right kind of attacks create resilience. As Nassim Taleb says, jumping off a 1 kilometer building will kill you, but jumping off a 1 meter ledge 1,000 times is going to make you stronger. Okay, so some attacks are fatal, but undergoing and living through these kinds of attack vectors can make you stronger. So take heart. You've got to keep building and hodling through the FUD. when you engage in this kind of activity, there's a whole lot of people telling you you're too small, you can't beat the state, they're going to regulate you, they're going to put you out of business, you're not going to win, and you've got to keep building through that doubt and that fear. Find the people who believe in your mission and will get behind you, because over time, yes, you take some hits, you take some losses, but you actually do start to achieve some wins. So don't ignore the FUD. You're not going to win in a straight line. Bitcoin's done this more times than any of you can count on one hand. You've got to be able to undergo deep and prolonged setbacks. Don't argue, build it. Okay? Sound money arguments, fiat versus gold versus silver, the debates, the Austrians, the monetarists. Cool stuff. I'm an economist, intellectually stimulating, but a person or a group of people went and built something and tested it in the real world. So get out and build. Strong defense and offense is deliberately designed. Okay, Bitcoin didn't just magically appear out of the ground. It's not an example of spontaneous order. The incentive structure of the network is a brilliant game theoretical design. It's one of the most genius inventions in history. And once that's designed, it creates these phenomenal incentives that keep this network strong and functional. But it is code that someone thought about and wrote and built, and the whole network and that whole infrastructure around that is a deliberate design. So we need to think deliberately. We need to think about scalability. David spoke about state-proofing earlier. You can sink a borehole, and then you are kind of state-proof to some degree from mismanaged water services. You can stick a solar panel on your roof, but that's not scalable. It's maybe necessary, but scalable solutions require kind of institutional capacity. Okay, you want to be able to be state-proof at scale. A coal power station, privately built, connected to towns through private networks, is non-state scale, decentralized scale, state-proof scale. And then you've got to know how to identify your early supporters. There were early adopters in Bitcoin, and then you've got to be gracious to the late supporters. Okay? Some people are buying their first Bitcoin in 2026. Don't ridicule them. All right. Welcome them on board and get them going. Final comment. Bitcoiners, this is from me back to the Bitcoiners. We've taken the lessons. Let's come back. Bitcoiners tend to be leave-me-alone libertarian types. Okay? I have a huge soft spot for that type because that's a big part of my DNA. But you may not care about power. You may not care about exercising authority. But power and authority care about you. You know that famous old saying, I don't care about politics. Well, politics cares about you. So don't shun authority. Consider what it means to truly build and cultivate and practice and exercise the power to be resilient to state attacks, to neutralize state attack vectors, and to exercise authority over domains that are crying out for order. Okay, so that is a rallying cry, I suppose, to think beyond your individual self, the guy who just wants to hide away on his farm with his boreholes and his bitcoins and his guns, and thinking how you can scale your efforts and take authority back over the domains that the anarcho-tyrannical state is busy destroying. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you, Russell. Where can we get a copy of your book?
Yeah, my book is called When Money Destroys Nations. It was about the terrible Zimbabwean hyperinflationary collapse, and it's on Amazon. So look up When Money Destroys Nations with my name next to it, and I'll get a few dollars of income from your sale. But it's a book about what happens when states destroy money, when they really go on the attack in the monetary realm. If you think the dollar's been debased, if you think the rand has been debased, you ain't seen nothing compared to Zimbabwe, Venezuela, and various other countries in mid-century when the state really grabs hold of that domain and destroys the currency. Are there any questions?
We can't do questions.
We're over time. Okay.
Can't do questions. Thank you very much.
If you got a question, I saw we can chat downstairs.
Come find him afterwards.
Thanks very much. Thanks for letting me go a little bit over time. Thanks, guys.
As someone who lives in a defunct small town municipality, I appreciate the work you're doing. Thank you very much. Thanks.